Hi everyone, in this video I'll be discussing how to check the transmission shift selector cable grommet and taking the shifter out of my C5 Corvette. Hi everyone, and welcome to the channel about building a kit car, Corvettes, and other car topics. If you like what you see, please subscribe and hit the notification buttons below and share with others on social media. So I started hearing all these stories about people getting stranded because they put their car into gear and the car does not move. It turns out the linkage cable from the shifter to the transmission has a grommet on it which could get old and deteriorated from use and the heat of the road. It can fall apart, leaving your transmission shift selection cable detached. Since I had my whole center console apart, it seemed like it would be easy to check since I'm only 4 nuts away. Well, only 4 nuts away was more like a week of a pain in my ass. There's all these realistic outcomes going through my head, which all cost money. I could have this dead car stuck in my garage that I need a tow truck to move, and Corvettes are not the easiest cars to tow either due to the low ground clearance. So I proceeded with caution. Now let me just say, if you watch this video, you will see how to avoid the pitfalls I made, and the video will give you how to do this. But I am not sugarcoating this one. I had some serious trials and tribulations that can be avoided. I started taking the 4 nuts actually off, but there is 1 nut that is behind a cable coming from the firewall to the shifter. It is part of the safety release. I say that easily now, but at the time I was like, what is this extra cable and how do I get it off? So I tried to remove it because it looked simple, but I couldn't get it off. So I called a Corvette expert, and I just needed to pull the cable towards the back of the car and pull it off the ball joint. I used a needle nose to do this. Then you have to lift it out of the plastic flange around the shifter. It only goes in one way. Now that the cable was out of the way, I was able to get to the last nut. So as I started removing the shifter, it is like a pendulum with the shifter cable about 10 inches below the inside of the car, and it was right next to the torque tube. So there is no space. There is no slack on the cable either. It is not easy to get even light into this area. I finally pried off the cable with a 10-inch flathead screwdriver. So the shifter sticks out like 6 or 8 inches. You got the plate, and then below it is like 10 inches of the other part, the pendulum part. So as the shifter goes forward, this pendulum goes back, and as you put the shifter back, this pendulum goes forward, and on the bottom of the pendulum is a little ball joint sticking out, and then you got this cup that grabs it, and the grommet that you're looking at is inside of that cup. And so if that fails, this will just fall off, and then you're shifting all day long, and the grommet's not grabbing anything, and therefore you're not shifting, and your car doesn't move. So as I get this all off, I could see that the grommet is actually the latest grommet. It has been replaced. So then I'm sitting there and I'm like, great, I'm all set. How the am I going to get this thing back together? The biggest issue is you can't see anything or get to anything because of the size of the flange around the shifter. And remember, I have to get 10 inches past that and snap something together. I can't even get my hand in there. So this is one small video, but this played out over a week with some serious frustration. So you could see attempt after attempt after attempt, and the shifter cable is so stiff and tight that I have to get a clothes wire to use as a hook to pull it up, to try to marry it to the ball at the end of the shifter, or the end of the pendulum. Then I ended up buying a 14-inch needle nose pair of pliers, so once I hooked it in place, I could squeeze the needle nose to lock on the grommet. And in this whole area, it's all sharp plastic, so I had to put a glove on since my hand was getting beat up. So then I'm like, oh great, the worst is over. Not really. So I can't get what I know now as the safety wire back on the shifter. I have to shift it into drive to give me some slack to get it on, but then I can't put it back in the park. So after a bunch of WTF moments, I called my expert again, and he gave me a sequence. First, plug the wire harness back into the shifter, then put your foot on the brake and put the ignition switch over to pass the accessory, but don't start the car, and this loosened the cable right up, and I was able to put it on in seconds and lock it back into the flange. And then I was like, ignorance equals frustration. I have never dealt with shifters, computer-controlled safety features in a car, so it has really opened my eyes to a whole new level of complexity behind the scenes going on. Then I started my car, hoping I would not drive through the wall into my kitchen, and we're good. So if I had to do it again, here's how I would do it. 1, if I had the option of being under the car, I would first look under, and hopefully without removing the torque tube, you could see the grommet or replace it if needed. With the torque tube not there, it would be really easy to do, but with it there, you might even be visually blocked like I was, and it might be just as frustrating. But I'm not sure. If you're going from the top of the car, this is exactly how I'd do it. Put your foot on the brake, put the ignition all the way to the right before starting the car, and release the safety cable from the firewall area and put it in park. Remove the key. Take all 4 nuts out, pry the end off, replace the grommet if needed. You'll want the dark one and not the white one. The white one will deteriorate again. Use a hook to pull the cable back up. Use a 14-inch needle nose or some other kind of pliers to crimp it on, and put all 4 nuts back. Turn the ignition back on while your foot's on the brake. Put the safety cable back on and the plastic retainer back in its place. And then try starting your car and try not to drive through your wall. Easy peasy. If you have all your tools in place ready to go, you can pull this off in an hour with this information. If you need to remove your center console first, then maybe an extra 30 minutes. Check out removing your center console video in the description below. Until next time, please hit the subscribe and notification buttons. Don't drive through your wall, and have a great day.